Hi, welcome back. This story is my sister claimed she was pregnant with my husband, then my MIL handed me divorce papers. So $47,000. The number glowed in the center of the spreadsheet, a sharp blue light cutting through the darkness of my kitchen at 5 in the morning. My bare feet stuck to the cold tile floor, and the only sound in the house was the coffee maker hissing behind me, spitting hot water into the glass carafe. I had been the senior tax accountant for Novak Family Holdings for 9 years, and I knew every vendor code by heart, but I did not know this one. A consulting fee for a company with no website, no physical address, and a tax identification number that had been issued 3 weeks ago. I reached for my coffee, but my hand stopped. Heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs. Boyd walked into the kitchen. He was already fully dressed in his navy suit, the one Patricia had bought him, and he adjusted his silver Omega watch as he passed the kitchen island. He did not look at the laptop screen. He did not look at me. He reached past my shoulder, took the ceramic mug I had placed on the counter exactly 4 minutes ago and drank. I waited for him to ask why I was up. I waited for him to ask about the spreadsheet. Late tonight, he said. He placed the empty mug in the sink, not in the dishwasher, and the back door clicked shut before I could say a word. The silence rushed back in louder than before. I sat there for a long time. The smell of lemon floor cleaner from the night before still hung heavy in the air, mixing with the scent of burnt coffee. I should have closed the file. I should have deleted the line item. Instead, my fingers moved across the trackpad and dragged the document into a hidden folder I had named MISC Backup. I did not know why I did it. I just knew that I could not let it go. 6 months later, I sat at a table covered in starched white linen and understood exactly why I had saved that file. The private room at Ristorante Marco smelled of melted candle wax, and Patricia's perfume Joy by Dior applied so heavily it tasted metallic in the back of my throat. It was my 40th birthday. Patricia had chosen the flowers, white lilies that looked more appropriate for a funeral than a celebration, and she had chosen the guests. My sister Tara sat at the far end of the table. Tara had not looked at me once since the appetizers arrived. She stared at her water glass, her fingers shredding a paper napkin into tiny wet lumps. The air in the room felt thin, like we were at a high altitude, and the clinking of silverware against china sounded violent. Boyd sat to my right. He had his phone in his lap, hidden under the tablecloth, and his thumb moved in a rhythmic hypnotic scroll. In the corner of the room, a small red light blinked on a tripod. Boyd had set up a camera, claiming he wanted to capture the speeches, but no one was speaking. Tara stood up. The screech of her chair legs against the parquet floor made everyone freeze. "I have something to share," she said. Her voice was small, thinner than usual. She looked at Patricia, not at me. "I am pregnant," she whispered. 4 months. The room went absolutely still. I looked at Boyd. I waited for him to turn his head to act surprised to drop his phone. He did not move. His thumb kept scrolling. He knew. The cold started in my fingertips and raced up my arms. They all knew. Patricia stood up from the head of the table. She smoothed the front of her pastel twin set and reached into her designer handbag. She pulled out a thick white envelope with a blue notary stamp clearly visible on the bottom corner. She placed it in front of me with both hands gentle and deliberate, as if she were presenting me with a gift. "Dearest Patricia," said, her voice soft and terrifyingly calm. "It has been 9 years. We all understand that this is not anyone's fault." She pushed the envelope closer to my plate, nudging aside a fork. "Boyd needs to move on," she said. "The family needs to move on." "You understand that, don't you?" I looked at the envelope. I looked at the blue stamp. I looked at the white lilies. "Patricia," I said. She paused, a polite smile fixed on her face. "Where is your pen?" The silence that followed was different. It was not the silence of a secret being kept, but the silence of a script being broken. Patricia blinked once slowly. She reached into her purse and handed me a silver Montblanc pen. I opened the envelope. I did not read the terms. I flipped to the signature page. My hand did not shake. That was the most surprising part of the entire evening. My hand was steady, solid, and capable. I signed my name Claire Novak with the same precision I had used on tax returns and audit reports for nearly a decade. I capped the pen and pushed the papers back across the white tablecloth. "Thank you," I said. I stood up. I picked up my purse. I looked around the table. My cousin Meredith had her mouth slightly open. Tara was crying, now silent, shaking sobs that made her shoulders jump. Boyd was still looking at his phone, but the camera in the corner was still blinking, recording every second. I walked out. The October air outside on the sidewalk hit me like a physical blow. The wind cut through my dress and the noise of Chicago traffic roared in my ears, a chaotic symphony of horns and engines. I stood there on the concrete. I did not sit on the curb. I did not lean against the brick wall. I just stood. My phone felt heavy in my hand. I dialed Diane. She answered on the second ring. "I just signed the papers," I said. There was a pause on the other end, followed by the sound of a chair scraping back. "Where are you?" Diane asked. Her voice was sharp professional, the voice of a lawyer who smelled blood. "Ristorante Marco," I said. "But I am not going back inside." "Stay there," she said. "Do not talk to anyone. I am coming." I hung up and watched the restaurant through the plate glass window. Inside, the lights were warm and golden. I could see Boyd standing near the door now. He was finally off his phone. He was looking out at the street, looking at me. He raised his phone and typed something. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down at the screen. A text from Boyd. "It is done." Step 2 is live. I stared at the message. He had meant to send that to someone else. A taxi pulled up to the curb, and Diane stepped out. She didn't say a word. She just opened the back door and waited. I got in. As the car pulled away, merging into the stream of taillights, heading away from the city, I looked back one last time. Boyd was still standing there, framed by the white lilies and the warm light, thinking he had won. I touched the cold glass of the window and closed my eyes. He had no idea what was in the folder named MISC Backup. He had no idea that while he was planning a divorce, I had been documenting a felony. "Drive," I told Diane, and for the first time in 9 years, I breathed. Diane placed a glass of red wine on the granite countertop. She didn't use a coaster. In the Novak house, a glass without a coaster was a crime, but here in Diane's Wicker Park kitchen, it was just a Saturday night. The wine was dark, almost black in the low light of the pendant lamps. I stared at it. My hands were still cold from the sidewalk, and the warmth of the room felt foreign, like I had walked into someone else's life. "Drink," Diane said. She didn't ask if I was okay. She knew better. I picked up the glass and took a sip. It tasted like oak and cherries, sharp enough to cut through the lingering metallic taste of fear in my mouth. I told her everything. I started with the white lilies and ended with a text message Boyd had sent by mistake. As I spoke, the story sounded ridiculous, the kind of thing that happened to women in movies, not to tax accountants who double-checked every receipt. Diane listened. She leaned against her refrigerator, arms crossed over her chest, her eyes narrowed. She didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp. When I finished, the silence in the kitchen was heavy, but it wasn't the suffocating silence of my dining room. It was the silence of a lawyer building a case. "You know what makes me the angriest," Diane said finally. Her voice was low, controlled. "It isn't the affair. Men have affairs. It isn't even the pregnancy, though God knows that is brutal." She walked over to the table and sat opposite me. "It is the venue, Claire. They did this at your birthday party. They sat you down in front of 12 people, put a cake on the table, and served you divorce papers as a main course. That is not just ending a marriage. That is a public execution." "I didn't collapse," I said. The words felt strange in my mouth. "I know," Diane said. "That is the part that scares them." She opened her laptop. The screen glowed, illuminating her face. She typed something, her fingers hitting the keys with aggressive speed. "Illinois is a no-fault state," she said, not looking up. "Since 2016, the courts generally do not care about infidelity when it comes to dividing assets. He could sleep with half of Chicago, and the judge would still split the bank accounts down the middle." I felt a dull ache behind my eyes. I knew this. I was an accountant. I knew the numbers of separation, even if I hadn't lived the emotion. "But," Diane said, and she stopped typing. She looked at me. "There is something else. It is called dissipation of marital assets. I frowned. I knew the term, but only in abstract corporate structures. If Boyd used marital funds to facilitate the affair, Diane said, leaning forward. If he bought dinners, paid for hotels, bought gifts, or gave cash to your sister to support a lifestyle you didn't know about, that is dissipation. The court takes that very seriously. It comes out of his share. And if he hid assets to prepare for this, if there is a second set of books, that is fraud. She tapped the table with one fingernail. You were their accountant for 9 years. Tell me the truth. What did you see? I looked down at the wine glass. I saw the reflection of the kitchen lights in the dark liquid. I saw a lot of things, I said softly. I saw consulting fees for companies that didn't exist. I saw withdrawals that didn't match expense reports. I saw transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. And what did you do? Diane asked. I saved them, I said. Diane stopped moving. The kitchen went very quiet. What did you say? I have a folder, I said, my voice steadying. I call it miscellaneous backup. Every time I saw something that didn't add up, every time Boyd told me not to worry about a receipt, I saved a copy. I don't know why. I just couldn't delete them. How many files, Claire? 847. Diane stared at me. A slow, terrifying smile spread across her face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a general who had just been handed the enemy's battle plans. Show me. 2 in the morning is the hour when the world stops pretending to be okay. I was lying on Diane's sofa, wrapped in a knitted gray blanket that smelled of vanilla and dust. Diane had gone to bed hours ago, but sleep was a country I couldn't visit. The laptop sat open on the coffee table, the blue light casting long, strange shadows across the room. The folder was open. 847 files. I scrolled through them. When I had saved them over the years, they had been individual moments of confusion or suspicion. Viewed one by one, they were just accounting anomalies. Viewed all together at 2 in the morning, they were a map of my own erasure. File number 1, March of last year. $47,000 to a consulting firm with a P.O. box in Gary, Indiana. I remember that day. I had asked Boyd about it. He had kissed my forehead, told me it was internal restructuring, and asked what was for dinner. I had made lasagna. File number 12, August 2 years ago. A hotel receipt from the Palmer House. 2 nights. Room service for 2. Champagne. The date matched the weekend. Boyd told me he was at a conference in Detroit. I had spent that weekend cleaning the garage because Patricia said it looked cluttered. I clicked on a file from 4 years ago. A cash withdrawal. $5,000. The sheer volume of it crushed me. This wasn't just money. This was time. This was affection. This was my life siphoned off dollar by dollar, lie by lie, to build a parallel world where I didn't exist. I wasn't the wife. I was the bank. I was the staff. I was the warm body that kept the tax auditors away while they lived the life I was paying for. Why did I stay? Why did I save these instead of screaming? Because I was a coward, a voice whispered in my head. No. A coward would have looked away. A coward would have deleted the files to keep the peace. I didn't delete them. I kept them. I polished them. I organized them by date and amount. Tears pricked my eyes hot and stinging. I let them fall. I didn't wipe them away. I sat there in the dark living room of my friend's house and cried for the woman who had made lasagna while her husband spent $47,000 on a ghost company. My phone buzzed on the cushion beside me. The screen lit up. Boyd? I stared at the name. It was 2:17 in the morning. I picked it up. Claire, we need to discuss when you can get your things. Mom wants the guest room cleared out by Tuesday for the new decor. I read the text twice. He didn't ask where I was. He didn't ask if I was safe. He didn't apologize. He wanted to know when I would remove the physical evidence of my existence from his mother's house so they could redecorate. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap like a bone breaking. It was a quiet click like a lock turning. I put the phone down face down on the table. I looked back at the laptop. 847 files. I opened my personal email account. I composed a new message addressed to myself. I didn't write a subject line. I just dragged the entire folder into the attachment box. The progress bar moved slowly, blue, steady, relentless. Upload complete. I hit send. I watched the message vanish from the outbox. It was done. The evidence was no longer just on a laptop that could be stolen or broken. It was in the cloud. It was everywhere. I closed the laptop. I pulled the gray blanket up to my chin. The tears had stopped. My eyes felt dry and scratchy, but my chest felt lighter, as if a heavy stone had been removed from my ribs. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a decade, I slept without dreaming of numbers. The smell of coffee woke me. Sunlight streamed into Diane's kitchen, bright and unapologetic. It hit the yellow tiles and made the room glow. It was a different universe from the 5:30 a.m. darkness of the Novak kitchen. I sat up on the sofa. My back ached, but it was a good ache, the kind that reminded you that you were alive. Diane was already up. She was wearing a silk robe and reading the news on her tablet. She looked up as I walked into the kitchen. "There is coffee in the pot," she said. I poured a cup. I didn't put milk in it. Boyd took milk. I had always taken milk because it was easier to buy one type. Today I drank it black. It was bitter and hot and perfect. Diane put her tablet down. She looked at me, really looked at me with that intense analyzing gaze she usually saved for opposing counsel. So she said, "What do you want to do?" She didn't ask what I needed to do. She didn't ask what Patricia wanted me to do. She asked what I wanted. I leaned against the counter. The morning sun warmed my arms through my sweater. "I want to talk to a lawyer," I said. Diane smiled. It was a genuine smile, this time soft around the edges. "You are talking to a lawyer," she said. I opened my mouth to answer, to tell her I wanted to hire her officially, but her phone rang. It wasn't a text, it was a call. Diane glanced at the screen and her expression changed instantly. The warmth vanished. The lawyer was back. She held the phone up so I could see the caller ID. "Hartley and Associates. Boyd's lawyers," I whispered. "On a Saturday morning, they are scared," Diane said. She didn't pick up. She let it ring the sound loud and demanding in the quiet kitchen. "They know you left with a bag, but they don't know what was in it. They're calling to see how much damage control they need to do." The ringing stopped. A voicemail notification popped up immediately. Diane looked at me. "They're handling it," she said. "Or they think they are." She picked up her coffee cup and raised it in a silent toast. "Let's see how they handle 847 files." Diane's office in downtown Chicago was nothing like the executive suites at Novak Family Holdings. There was no mahogany paneling, no hush carpets that swallowed the sound of expensive loafers, and definitely no scent of Joy by Dior. It smelled of old paper, vanilla, coffee, and the sharp electric ozone of a laser printer that had been running all morning. I sat in a chair that was comfortable but purely functional, watching dust motes dance in the shaft of light cutting through the blinds. Diane was behind her desk, surrounded by stacks of files that looked like chaos but were actually a fortress of organized logic. "We need to talk about access," she said, not looking up from a yellow legal pad. "Hartley and Associates are going to claim you stole proprietary data. They are going to use words like corporate espionage and theft of trade secrets. We need to prove you had the keys to the castle, not a crowbar." I stared at the bookshelf behind her. A copy of the Illinois compiled statutes leaned against a framed photo of Diane's golden retriever. "I was the senior tax accountant," I said. "I had lock-in credentials." "That is job function," Diane said, tapping her pen against the pad. "They will argue that your function was limited to specific accounts and that you exceeded your authorization by accessing the executive discretionary funds. Did you ever sign a document that explicitly expanded your access?" I closed my eyes, trying to navigate the filing cabinet in my brain. 9 years of paperwork, non-disclosure agreements, annual reviews, benefits enrollment. "Wait," I said. My eyes snapped open. 2019. Diane stopped tapping. "Go on." Boyd was in Tokyo for 3 weeks closing the deal with the Japanese distributors. It was tax season. There was an issue with the IRS regarding a payroll discrepancy from the previous quarter, and they needed an authorized representative to sign off on the audit response immediately. Boyd couldn't do it from overseas, and Patricia didn't want the legal liability of signing personally. I leaned forward. Patricia made me the designated tax representative for the company. She signed a power of attorney, granting me full access to all financial records to resolve tax disputes. Diane's eyes widened. Was it limited to that specific audit? I shook my head. The IRS form was specific, but the internal corporate resolution Patricia signed to authorize it was broad. She wanted to make sure I didn't have to bother her again if another issue came up. She hates tax paperwork. She calls it administrative clutter. Was it ever revoked? Diane asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. I thought about the last 4 years, the filing cabinet, the emails. No, I said. I am still the designated representative. Diane leaned back in her chair and let out a long, low whistle. That changes the weather, Claire. They cannot simultaneously claim you were unauthorized to view documents while holding a standing order from the chairman of the board demanding you review documents. The contradiction is their problem, not ours. She made a note, pressing the pen so hard into the paper that I could hear the fibers tear. Is there an upcoming event? She asked suddenly. A board meeting? A gala? The annual stakeholder dinner? I said automatically. Next month. It is the holy grail of the Novak social calendar. Patricia spent 6 months planning the seating chart alone. Diane wrote that down too. She didn't explain why, but the corner of her mouth twitched upward. The mention of the tax documents pulled a memory loose, something I hadn't thought about in years. I was back in the Novak offices 7 years ago. It was late past 8 in the evening, and the building was silent except for the hum of the industrial air conditioning. I was staring at a discrepancy in the ledger, a transfer of $5,000 to a personal account I didn't recognize. I had called Boyd. He hadn't answered. The next morning, an email had appeared in my inbox. No subject line, just one sentence. That is not your business. I will handle the categorization. He hadn't been angry. He hadn't been defensive. He had simply drawn a line in the sand with the casual indifference of a man who owned the beach. I remember sitting there, my hand hovering over the delete key. I should have deleted it. A good wife would have deleted it. A trusting employee would have deleted it. Instead, I had created a new folder. I named it MISC_backup. I dragged the email into it. I didn't do it because I wanted to hurt him. I did it because his dismissal had made me feel small, and saving that email made me feel for a fleeting second like I existed. That was the first file. The seed that grew into a forest of 847 trees. I need to call Tara, I said, standing up. Diane looked up from her notes. Be careful. I took the elevator down to the parking garage. I needed the cold air. The garage was concrete and gray, echoing with the sound of tires on pavement. I walked to the far corner near a pillar that blocked the wind and dialed. She answered on the first ring. Claire, her voice was wet, thick with tears. Are you okay? I asked. The sound of her sobbing echoed in the empty garage. You are asking me, Tara choked out. After what I did, Claire, I didn't want to. Patricia said it was the only way to protect the family. I looked at a grease stain on the concrete floor. I am not asking about the family, I said. I am asking about you. You are pregnant, Tara. Are you okay? She went silent. I could hear her breathing ragged and shallow. I don't know what I am doing, she whispered. I am scared. Boyd says he will take care of everything, but he talks about it like it is a business deal. You need your own lawyer, I said. Not the family lawyer. Not Boyd's friend. You need someone who works for you. Why? She asked. Why are you helping me? Because you are my sister, I said. And because I know them. I closed my eyes. I didn't forgive her. The knife in my bag was still fresh, and her fingerprints were on the handle, but I knew she hadn't sharpened the blade. Patricia had done that. Tara was just the hand they had guided. Tara sniffled. Claire, I have a question. The doctor tells me things about vitamins and appointments, and I keep forgetting. Is there an app for that? I feel so stupid. She sounded so young. 28, but in that moment she sounded 12. Download Rev Audio, I said. It is a recording app. It is free. Rev Audio. Yes. Turn it on when you go to the doctor. Record everything he says so you can listen to it later. It saves the files to the cloud. Okay, she said. Thank you, Claire. I hung up. My hand was shaking. I wasn't just giving her advice for the doctor. I knew Boyd. I knew that eventually the charm would wear off and the negotiator would come out. And when he did, I wanted Tyra to have a record even if she didn't know she was making one. When I got back to the office, the atmosphere had shifted. The dust motes were gone, replaced by a sharp clinical tension. Diane was holding a thick envelope. A courier had just delivered it. "Hartley and Associates," she said, tossing it onto the desk. It landed with a heavy thud. I picked it up. The letterhead was cream-colored heavy stock expensive. "Cease and desist," it read in bold black letters. "Demand for preservation of confidential materials." I skimmed the legal jargon until my eyes hit the number. "Violation of the confidentiality agreement signed upon employment will result in immediate litigation for damages not less than $500,000. $500,000. My stomach dropped. That was more money than I had ever seen in one place outside of the company accounts. That was a house. That was a life. "They want to bury me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Diane snatched the letter back. She didn't look worried. She looked annoyed, like someone had tried to pay for coffee with a button. "They want you to read this and freeze, Claire. That is the point. They are throwing big numbers at the wall to see if you flinch." She tossed the letter into a tray marked pending. "Federal whistleblower statutes trump corporate non-disclosure agreements," she said firmly. "You cannot contractually obligate someone to conceal a crime. It is unenforceable. And the fact that they sent this within 24 hours means they are terrified of what you have." She looked me in the eye. "If they thought you were bluffing, they would have ignored you. They just put a price tag on their fear. It is $500,000. I looked at the tray where the letter sat. $500,000. That was the value of their silence. I sat down in the functional chair. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but Diane was right. They were afraid, and for the first time in 9 years, I wasn't the one shaking. The boutique hotel River North was sleek, modern, and aggressively neutral. The lobby smelled of green tea and polished concrete, a sharp departure from the cloying scent of Joy by Dior that seemed to permeate every square inch of my life for the last decade. I placed my personal credit card on the marble counter. It was a card I had opened 6 years ago and rarely used, kept for emergencies that never happened until now. "How many nights will you be staying with us, Miss Novak?" the receptionist asked. She was young, with a tight ponytail and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, but she was polite. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the wallet. "I do not know," I said. "Put me down for 3. I will let you know if I need to extend." She typed for a moment, the clicking of her nails on the keyboard the only sound in the high-ceilinged room. "Room 412, she said, sliding a gray plastic keycard across the marble. I took the elevator up alone. The hallway was silent, lined with abstract art that meant nothing and offended no one. I opened the door to room 412. It was small. The bed was dressed in crisp white linens, pulled tight enough to bounce a quarter. There were no white lilies. There were no family portraits staring down at me with disappointed eyes. There was just a desk, a chair, and a window looking out over the gray expanse of the Chicago skyline. I put my bag on the luggage rack. I walked to the window and pressed my forehead against the cold glass. Down below, the city was moving. Taxis were honking. People were rushing to dinners and meetings, living lives that made sense. For the first time in 9 years, nobody knew where I was. Patricia did not know. Boy did not know. Even Diane only knew the neighborhood, not the room number. I stood there for a long time watching the lights flicker on in the buildings across the street. The tightness in my chest, a constant companion since the birthday dinner, loosened just a fraction. I took a breath. The air in the room was recycled and dry, but it tasted like oxygen. By Sunday evening, the silence of the hotel room had shifted from unsettling to comforting. I ordered a pizza from a place Diane recommended. When the delivery app asked for toppings, my thumb hovered over the pepperoni Boyd's standard order. He hated mushrooms. He said the texture reminded him of slugs and that they ruined the integrity of the cheese. For 9 years, I had eaten pepperoni pizza on the rare occasions we ordered out. I tapped the box for mushrooms. Then I tapped it again. Extra mushrooms. When the box arrived, I didn't sit at the small desk in the corner. I didn't put a napkin on my lap. I placed the cardboard box directly on the carpet in the center of the room. I kicked off my shoes. I sat on the floor, my back resting against the frame of the bed, my legs stretched out in front of me. I opened the box. The smell of yeast and garlic filled the small room, overpowering the green tea scent. It was greasy and excessive, and exactly what I wanted. I picked up a slice. A mushroom fell onto the carpet. I looked at it. In the Novak house, a stain on the rug would have been a crisis. Patricia would have sighed that heavy, disappointed sigh. Boyd would have called the cleaners before the sauce had even set. I picked up the mushroom and ate it. I would pay the cleaning fee if I had to. It didn't matter. I turned on the television. I scrolled past the financial news channels Boyd kept on a constant loop. I found a documentary about deep-sea creatures, the kind with bioluminescent lights that lived in the crushing pressure of the ocean floor. I watched a squid pulse with blue light in the darkness. I took another bite of pizza. It was the best thing I had tasted in a decade. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I let it buzz 3 times before I reached for it. The name on the screen made my stomach clench, but the pizza was still warm in my hand, and the squid was still glowing on the screen, and I realized I wasn't afraid. I swiped right. "Hello, Boyd." His voice was brisk clipped. It was his business voice, the one he used when a vendor missed a delivery window. "We need to talk about the logistics of the transition." I put the pizza crust back in the box. "I have a lawyer, Boyd. Talk to her." "I know you have Diane," he said, dismissing her with a tone that suggested she was a minor inconvenience, like a parking ticket. "But we need to be practical. The house is in Mother's name, obviously. The car lease is up next month. And we need to discuss the joint checking account before the next billing cycle." I listened to him list the components of our marriage as if they were depreciating assets in a quarterly report. The house, the car, the billing cycle. Not a word about the last 9 years. Not a word about the baby. Not a word about his wife sitting in a hotel room eating pizza on the floor. "You can send the inventory list to Diane," I said. "Claire, be reasonable. We are adults. We don't need to pay billable hours to decide who gets the espresso machine." I looked at the television. The deep-sea squid had vanished into the black water. "I don't want the espresso machine, Boyd." "Good, then we are making progress. I will have the movers pack your clothes. Mother wants the guest room cleared by Tuesday." I felt a flash of heat, sharp and sudden. It wasn't anger at the eviction. It was the casual assumption that I was something to be packed up and moved like winter coats going into storage. "Do not touch my things," I said. My voice was low, steady. "What? Do not touch my things." "Diane will arrange for a moving company to collect my personal effects. If you or Patricia touch a single box, Diane will file for a temporary restraining order to prevent the destruction of marital property." There was a silence on the other end of the line. It was a stunned silence. Boyd wasn't used to being interrupted. He wasn't used to resistance. "You are being dramatic," he said finally. "And you are being recorded," I lied. I wasn't recording. I didn't even know how to do that on my phone yet. But the lie came out smooth and cold, polished by the years I had spent watching him lie to auditors. Another silence. This one was longer. "Lawyer to lawyer, Boyd," I said. I hung up. I put the phone face down on the carpet. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird-like rhythm. I picked up another slice of pizza. My hands were shaking slightly, but I forced myself to take a bite. I chewed. I swallowed. I watched the television. I took up space on the floor. I took up space in the conversation. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. Monday morning brought rain. It streaked the hotel window, turning the Chicago skyline into a watercolor smear of gray and charcoal. I sat in the lobby with a cup of coffee that I hadn't made myself. The chairs were high-back velvet, designed to make guests feel important. I felt small but not invisible. I needed to call my mother. I had been putting it off. My mother, Mrs. Walsh, lived in Springfield, 3 hours south and a world away from the Novak Empire. She was a woman who believed in endurance. She had raised Tara and me on a nurse's salary after Dad died, working double shifts and teaching us that complaints were a luxury we couldn't afford. I dialed her number. She answered on the 4th ring. "Hello, Mom, it is Claire." There was a pause, the kind of pause that meant she knew something was wrong but was waiting for me to confirm it. "Claire, is everything all right? You are calling in the middle of a workday." I took a breath. I am not at work, Mom, I told her. I kept it simple. I told her about the dinner. I told her about the papers. I told her about Tara. When I got to the part about Tara, the line went dead silent. I could hear the hum of her refrigerator in the background 300 miles away. Pregnant, she whispered. With Boyd, yes. Oh my God. She didn't cry. My mother didn't cry over things that couldn't be fixed. She assessed the damage. Where are you? She asked. I am at a hotel. In the city. Claire, she said, and her voice cracked just a little. Do you want me to come up? I stared at the rain sliding down the glass doors of the lobby. 12 years ago, when I was 12 and Dad had just died, I had told her I was scared of the dark. She had sighed, her eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion, and said, You are the big sister, Claire. I need you to be strong. Tara needs you more than I need you. I had learned the lesson well. Asking for help was a burden. Needing things was a weakness. But today, she was asking me. She was offering. Do you want me to come up? I closed my eyes. A part of me, the part that was still 12 years old, wanted her to come. I wanted her to drive up I-55 and sit in the hotel room with me and tell me how to fix it. But I knew that if she came, I would slip back into the role of the strong daughter. I would spend the time comforting her, assuring her I was fine managing her shock so she wouldn't have to carry it. No, Mom, I said softly. Not yet. Are you sure? She sounded almost relieved, but there was worry there too. I am sure. I need a few days to figure this out. I need to be quiet for a little while. Okay, she said. Okay. But Claire, yes, I am going to call you every day. You don't have to answer, but I am going to call. I smiled and my throat felt tight. Okay, call me. And Mom, I said, I will come down for your birthday next month, just the two of us. There was a long pause. Just the two of us, she repeated. That sounds nice. We hung up. I sat in the high-backed velvet chair and watched the rain. I had said no to her not because I was afraid of being a burden, but because I needed the space to be myself. It was a different kind of no. It was a boundary, not a wall. That night, the hotel room felt smaller. The relief of the pizza and the floor had faded, replaced by the gnawing anxiety of the unknown. I had my freedom, yes, but freedom was terrifyingly empty. I lay in bed, the sheets cool against my skin. My phone lay on the nightstand charging. I hadn't logged out of the shared cloud account yet. Boyd had removed me from the bank accounts, I was sure, but he wasn't tech-savvy enough to remember the family data plan. We shared an iCloud account for the household devices, mostly to sync photos and calendars. I picked up the phone. It was 1 in the morning. I navigated to the message history. It was all there. The backups from his iPad, which he left on his bedside table every night. I found the conversation with Tara. My thumb hovered over the screen. I knew I shouldn't look. Diane would tell me it didn't matter, that the legal case was about the money, not the emotion. But I needed to know. I needed to understand the architecture of the demolition. I tapped the thread. I didn't start at the end. I scrolled up. I scrolled back past the birthday, past the week before, all the way back to 6 weeks ago. Boyd, you need to tell her. We cannot wait forever. Tara, but what if she refuses to sign? What if she fights Boyd? Mother has arranged everything. You just need to show up. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. 6 weeks. They have been planning the dinner for 6 weeks. While I was booking the audits for the third quarter, they were drafting the seating chart for my execution. I scrolled down. 4 weeks ago. Tara, are you sure, Boyd? I do not want to hurt her. She has been good to me. Boyd, she will be fine. Someone like Claire won't break. I stared at the words. Someone like Claire won't break. He wasn't comforting Tara. He was dismissing me. To him, I wasn't a person with a breaking point. I was a machine. I was a structural beam in the house of Novak, load-bearing, functional, and incapable of feeling pain. He counted on my resilience the same way he counted on the sun rising. He assumed I would absorb the blow, sign the papers, and quietly disappear because that is what I did. I absorbed. I processed. I fixed. I scrolled further. 2 weeks ago, Boyd, the lawyer says the birthday is the best time. If she signs at a social event under observation, it is much harder for her to claim undue duress later. We will have witnesses. It needs to look like a family decision. My hand shook so hard the phone almost slipped from my grip. It wasn't just cruelty. It was strategy. Patricia had chosen the restaurant, not for the ambience, but for the witnesses. She had chosen the date not to ruin my birthday, but to use the social pressure of the celebration to force my hand. If I had made a scene, I would have looked unstable. If I signed quietly, I looked compliant. They had weaponized my own politeness against me. I scrolled to the day before the party. Tara, I cannot do it. I am going to be sick. Please let me stay home. Boyd, you have to come. It is already set. Just look at Mother. Do not look at Claire. And finally, a draft message from Tara, one she had screenshotted and sent to Boyd, but never sent to me. Sometimes I think I shouldn't do this. Claire never did anything to deserve this. Boyd hadn't replied to that one. I lowered the phone. The room was dark, lit only by the blue glow of the screen. Someone like Claire won't break. He was right. I hadn't broken. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't thrown the wine glass. I had signed the papers and thanked his mother. But he was wrong about the reason. I didn't break because I was strong in the way he thought, passive, enduring, stone-like. I didn't break because I had been preparing for this for 9 years without even knowing it. I got out of bed. I walked to the desk and opened my laptop. I opened the folder, 847 files. I opened a new browser tab and searched for the IRS whistleblower office. I found Form 211, application for award for original information. I didn't fill it out, not yet. I just downloaded the PDF. I saved it to my desktop right next to the folder. I looked at the cursor blinking on the screen. He thought I was a beam that would hold the roof up no matter how much weight he put on it. He forgot that beams are also what you use to bring the house down. I closed the laptop. I crawled back into the cold hotel bed. I lay there in the dark, listening to the hum of the city, and for the first time in 6 weeks, the confusion was gone. The hurt was still there, sharp and bleeding, but the confusion had evaporated. This was a war. They had fired the first shot 6 weeks ago. I was just finally picking up my weapon, 1:12 in the morning. The time glowed on the digital clock next to the bed, the only steady point of light in the room. I had been lying in the dark for 2 hours, the hotel pillows propped behind my back, my phone burning a rectangle of warmth into my palm. I had found a conversation between Boyd and Tara earlier that evening, but I hadn't read it. Not really. I had seen the shape of it, the length of it, and turned away like someone shielding their eyes from a car accident. But now, in the silence of the 12th floor, with the city of Chicago breathing steadily outside my window, I needed to look at the wreckage. I unlocked the phone. I opened the message thread. My thumb hovered over the screen. It felt heavy as if the glass itself had weight. I scrolled up, not to the end where the betrayal was fresh, but to the beginning. 6 weeks ago. The first message was from Boyd. You need to tell her. We cannot wait forever. I read it twice. The timestamp was a Tuesday afternoon, 2:14. At 2:14 on that Tuesday, I had been sitting in my office reconciling the quarterly payroll for the subsidiary in Naperville. I remember texting Boyd around 3 to ask if he wanted salmon for dinner. He had replied with a thumbs-up emoji. He had been planning my replacement while I planned his dinner. I scrolled down. Tara, but what if she refuses to sign? What if she fights? Boyd's mother has arranged everything. You just need to show up. Tara, are you sure I do not want to hurt her? Boyd, she will be fine. Someone like Claire won't break. I stopped breathing for a moment. I stared at the words until they blurred. Someone like Claire won't break. He wasn't comforting her. He was stating a fact, a calculation he had made based on 9 years of data. He knew I wouldn't scream. He knew I wouldn't throw plates. He knew I would absorb the blow, process the trauma, and organize the aftermath because that was my function. I was the shock absorber for the Novak family. I took the bumps so their ride remained smooth. He was right. I hadn't broken. But he was wrong about why. I kept reading. The timeline unfolded with sickening precision. 2 weeks ago, Boyd, the lawyer, says the birthday is the best time. If she signs at a social event under observation, it is much harder for her to claim undue duress later. We will have witnesses. It needs to look like a family decision. Undue duress. I lowered the phone to my lap. The cold air from the air conditioner vent hit my face, drying the dampness on my skin. This wasn't an affair that got out of hand. This was a legal strategy. Patricia had chosen Ristorante Marco not for the risotto, but for the witnesses. She had invited my cousin Meredith, not because she liked her, but because Meredith was a gossip who would testify that I appeared calm. They had weaponized my own birthday to ensure I couldn't claim I was coerced. I looked at the window. My reflection was a pale ghost against the dark glass. They counted on my silence. They bet their entire future on the fact that Claire Novak follows the rules. I sat up, I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and turned on the lamp. The sudden light hurt my eyes, but I needed it. I opened my laptop. The screen came to life bright and waiting. I opened a new browser tab. I didn't go to my email. I went to the IRS website. I navigated to the whistleblower office. I downloaded Form 211. I filled in the header. Name of taxpayer, Novak Family Holdings. Taxpayer identification number 36. I typed the numbers from memory. My fingers flew across the keys. I attached the folder. 847 files. I didn't send it. I saved it as a draft. I looked at the cursor blinking next to the save button. Boyd was right. I didn't break. Beams don't break. They hold things up. But when you pull a load-bearing beam out of a house, the house doesn't break either. It collapses. I closed the laptop. I turned off the light. I lay back down, and for the first time in 6 weeks, the knot in my chest loosened. I slept. The sun in Diane's office the next morning was blinding. It bounced off the glass skyscrapers of downtown Chicago and flooded the room with a crisp, aggressive light. I sat in the client chair, my back straight. I was wearing the only suit I had brought with me, a charcoal gray blazer that usually made me feel invisible. Today it felt like armor. Diane placed a document on the desk between us. It was the settlement offer from Hartley and Associates. They are offering you 20% of the marital assets, she said, her voice flat, and a confidentiality clause that is thicker than the phone book. If you sign, you get the money in 30 days. If you speak to anyone about the company ever, you forfeit everything and owe them damages. I looked at the paper. It was an insult. 20%, I repeated. Diane nodded. They are banking on you being scared. They think you are hiding in a hotel room, terrified of the future, and that you will take the lifeline. She picked up another piece of paper. This one was old, the edges slightly curled. It was a copy I had pulled from my digital records. But then there is this, she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. The designated tax representative authorization form from 2019, signed by Patricia Novak. Diane tapped the signature with her index finger. I spent 3 hours on Westlaw this morning, she said. Here is the beauty of it. Hartley is threatening to sue you for theft of proprietary information. They claim you accessed files you had no business seeing. She leaned forward. But this document says you were not just allowed to see them, you were required to see them. Patricia signed a federal power of attorney granting you full access to all tax-related documents to resolve disputes. And since she never revoked it, that access stands. She sat back looking satisfied. So they have a choice. They can admit you were authorized, which means there is no theft and their lawsuit is frivolous. Or they can claim you weren't authorized, which means Patricia lied on a federal tax form in 2019. That is perjury. I looked at the signature. Patricia's handwriting was elegant, spiky, and distinct. She signed that because she didn't want to deal with the audit, I said. She signed it because she thought I would never use it against her. Arrogance is a wonderful thing for a lawyer to exploit, Diane said. She shuffled the papers, putting the settlement offer at the bottom of the pile and the authorization form on top. We are going to reject the offer. We are going to counter. And we are going to attach a forensic accounting of the dissipation of assets. Every hotel room, every dinner, every cash withdrawal Boyd made in the last 9 years. We are going to argue that he spent marital funds on his affair, and under Illinois law, you are entitled to be reimbursed for every cent. She looked at me. We are not just in a good position, Claire. We are driving the bus. I took a breath. The air in the office smelled of coffee and old paper, a smell I used to associate with late nights and stress. Now it smelled like leverage. Diane's computer pinged. She glanced at the screen, then looked back at me, her eyebrows raised. You forwarded me an email this morning, she said. From Feldman and Associates, I nodded. It was a firm I had applied to months ago on a whim one bad Tuesday when Patricia had criticized my filing system. I had forgotten about it. They replied, Diane said, David Feldman wants to interview you. Thursday. I stared at her. Feldman was one of the top boutique accounting firms in the city. They didn't hire people who had been fired. They didn't hire women in the middle of messy divorces. He knows about the Novak connection, I asked. Diane scrolled. He says here he has admired the clean audits coming out of Novak Holdings for years. He wants to know who was doing the work. I felt a strange sensation in my cheeks. I reached up and touched my face. I was smiling, not the polite, tight-lipped smile I gave Patricia when she critiqued my outfit, not the reassuring smile I gave Boyd when he came home late. This was real. It felt foreign, stretching muscles I hadn't used in years. I think I am going to be okay, I said. Diane stopped typing. She looked at me, her expression softening. You are going to be more than okay, Claire. You are going to be dangerous. That evening, I stood by the window of my hotel room. The city was a grid of gold and white lights stretching out to the black void of the lake. I called my mother. Mom, I said when she answered. Claire, her voice was anxious. Are you all right? I am, I said. And I meant it. I really am. I told her about the meeting with Diane. I didn't tell her the legal details. I just told her that I wasn't going to lose everything. I told her about the interview with Feldman. Oh, honey, she said, and I could hear the relief washing over her 300 miles away. I was so worried. I thought, well, I didn't know what to think. I pressed my hand against the cold glass. I know, Mom. I was worried too. But for the first time in 9 years, I feel like I am standing in my own place. Nobody is telling me where to sit. That is good, Claire. That is so good. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing important. The weather in Springfield, her garden, the neighbor's dog. It was the most normal conversation we had had in a decade. I hung up and looked out at Chicago. It felt finished. The panic was gone. The fear was gone. I had the files. I had the lawyer. I had a job interview. I had a plan. If it ended here, I thought, looking at the reflection of the room behind me, that would be enough. I could walk away. I could leave them to their mess and start over. It felt like victory. It felt like peace. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I turned, expecting a text from Diane, maybe confirming the time for tomorrow. I picked it up. Tara calling. I frowned. I had spoken to her on Saturday. She had sounded scared but stable. I swiped to answer. Hello, Claire. Her voice wasn't scared this time. It was hollow. It sounded like she was calling from the bottom of a well. Tara, what is wrong? He came to see me, she whispered. Boyd. He came to the apartment an hour ago. The peace in the room evaporated. The gold lights of the city suddenly looked like warning flares. What did he say? I asked, gripping the phone tighter. He knows Claire. He knows you have the files. And he told me what would happen to the baby if you used them. My blood ran cold. Tell me exactly what he said. I listened. And as she spoke, I realized that the war wasn't over. It hadn't even started. On Wednesday morning, Patricia Novak walked into the lobby of the boutique hotel River North. She did not look like a woman whose family empire was under siege. She looked like she was arriving for a board meeting she had already won. Her platinum hair was a helmet of perfection, not a single strand moving in the draft from the revolving doors. She wore a pale gray cashmere coat that cost more than my first car, and the triple strand of pearls at her throat caught the lobby lights with a dull, milky gleam. I sat at a small table near the window, a cup of cooling coffee in front of me. I watched her scan the room. It was a predatory gaze, sharp and efficient, dismissing the tourists and the business travelers until it locked onto me. She walked straight to my table. The sound of her heels on the marble floor was a rhythm I knew better than my own heartbeat. Click, click, click. The sound of authority arriving. She sat down opposite me without taking off her coat. She placed her quilted Chanel bag on the table, blocking the sunlight. The smell of Joy by Dior hit me. It was only 10 in the morning, but the scent was already heavy, a floral armor she applied before facing the world. "Hello, Claire," she said. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't order coffee. She simply occupied the space, assuming that her presence was the only agenda item that mattered. I placed my hands flat on the table. They were steady. I noticed that, and I noticed that I wasn't surprised by it anymore. "Patricia," I said. She smiled. It was the smile she used for waiters when they brought the wrong wine patient, condescending and utterly terrifying. "I know you think you are doing something important," she said softly. Her voice was a low hum designed not to carry to the next table. "You are a brilliant accountant, Claire. I have always said that. But you are also smart enough to know that there is nothing we cannot solve if we sit down like adults." I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold and bitter. "Boyd cares about you," she continued, leaning in slightly. "More than you think. He is worried about your mental state. We all are." I put the cup down. The ceramic clicked against the saucer. "You did not come here to discuss my mental state," I said. "You have lawyers for that. Why are you here?" Patricia paused. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. Her eyes tightened at the corners. She wasn't used to interruption. In the Novak house, people waited for her to finish paragraphs. "I am here to be realistic," she said. She smoothed the front of her coat. "You have files. We know you have files. But have you considered what happens to a certified public accountant who steals proprietary data?" I looked at her. "I have a lawyer, Patricia." "Lawyers look at the law," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that sounded like a caress. "I look at reputations. In Chicago, the accounting world is very small. When a firm asks if there are any pending complaints against a candidate, and the answer is yes, the interview usually ends right there." I stared at her. "You are threatening my license," I said. "I am being practical," she corrected. "I'm always practical. An investigation by the state board can take months. Even if you are cleared, the stain remains. Who hires a whistleblower, Claire? Nobody trusts a traitor even if they were right." She stood up. The conversation was over because she had decided it was over. She reached across the table and placed her hand on my shoulder. It was a gesture I had felt 1,000 times in 9 years. At dinners, at parties, at the hospital after the second miscarriage. It was a touch that meant be small. It was a touch that meant I own this space and you are renting it. I didn't flinch. I didn't shrug her off. I looked up at her and I let her see it. I let her see the absolute absence of need in my eyes. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need her money. I didn't even need her to understand. Her hand froze on my shoulder. She saw it. I saw the realization flicker behind her eyes, a sudden sharp intake of breath she tried to hide. She realized she was touching a stranger. The Claire she had molded for 9 years was gone, and the woman sitting in the chair was someone she couldn't calculate. She pulled her hand back as if the wool of my sweater had burned her. She picked up her bag. She adjusted her pearls. She walked away without another word, her heels clicking on the marble, but the rhythm was different. Faster. I watched her go. She had come to remind me of her power. Instead, she had confirmed mine. Thursday was a bludgeoning. I sat in Diane's office from 9 in the morning until the afternoon sun began to fade, watching my life being dismantled piece by piece. Patricia's visit had been the warning shot. This was the bombardment. Diane stood by the window, her phone pressed to her ear, listening to a voicemail. She hung up and turned to me. Her face was grim. "That was the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation," she said. "An anonymous complaint was filed this morning." I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. "What does it say?" "It alleges that you accessed and copied sensitive client data for personal leverage after planning to leave the firm," she said. "They are opening an investigation. It does not mean they will suspend your license immediately, but you will have to respond. You will have to produce documents. It will take 6 months, maybe a year. And during that time," I asked, "during that time, your license will be flagged as under investigation." I nodded. That was the first prong, the professional kill shot. Diane walked to her desk and picked up a stack of papers. "Prong 2, she said. "The Whisper campaign. I have 2 friends at mid-sized firms who called me this morning. Boyd has been making calls. ostensibly to ask for advice on how to handle a delicate family matter. He is telling people you are having a breakdown, that the divorce triggered a manic episode, and you are lashing out. I stared at the wall. Someone like Claire won't break, unless they need her to be broken to explain why she is fighting back. Prong 3, Diane continued tossing the heavy cream envelope onto the desk. The lawsuit threat we saw yesterday. $500,000 for breach of confidentiality. And Prong 4, I asked. Diane's eyes narrowed. Hardly, she said. He called you directly on Tuesday. That is a violation of Rule 4.2 of the Illinois Rules of Professional Conduct. A lawyer cannot contact a represented party without their counsel present. He knows that. He did it anyway because he thought he could scare you. She sat down. She looked tired. The coffee on her desk was cold, a dark ring forming on the paper coaster. They are hitting everything at once, Claire. They want you spinning. They want you so busy defending your license and your reputation that you forget about the IRS. I looked at the stack of papers, the complaint, the lawsuit, the notes about the rumors. They know exactly where to hit, I said softly. It wasn't the money. I could live in a studio apartment. It wasn't the house. It was the one thing I had built for myself, my competence, my reliability. For 15 years, I had been the person who fixed the numbers. Now they were telling the world I was the error. They are trying to erase me, I said. Diane leaned forward. They are trying, she said, but they made a mistake. They violated ethics rules to do it. We are filing a complaint against Hartley with the Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission today, and we are responding to the State Board with the designated representative document. She tapped the desk. It is messy, Claire. I won't lie to you. It is going to get mud on everything. I looked at my hands. They were still steady. Let it get messy, I said. By 7 in the evening, the rain had returned. It battered the glass of my hotel room, blurring the city lights into streaks of neon and charcoal. I hadn't turned on the overhead light. I sat on the edge of the bed in the gray twilight, my laptop open. The draft email to the IRS was still there. Form 211 attached. Evidence folder attached. I was ready. Diane was ready. We had taken their best shot and we were still standing. My phone rang. It wasn't a text. It was a video call. Tara. I frowned. I had spoken to her on Tuesday when she was scared but safe. I swiped to answer. Tara's face filled the screen. She was in her car. The interior light cast harsh shadows under her eyes, which were red and swollen. She was shaking. Tara, I asked, "Where are you?" "I am outside," she said. Her voice was thin, reedy. I couldn't stay in the apartment. What happened? She took a ragged breath. Boyd came over. He wanted to talk about the arrangement. I sat up straighter. The arrangement. He was nice, Claire. That is the worst part. He was so nice. He sat down and asked if I had taken my vitamins. He asked about the baby. Go on. Then he told me about the investigation, Tara said. He said that if you file those papers with the IRS, the government will freeze the company's assets. He said it could take years to resolve. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. He said that if the accounts are frozen, he cannot assess the discretionary funds, he said. He said he wouldn't be able to pay for the apartment, or the medical bills, or the support for the baby. I felt the blood drain from my face. He told me it wasn't a threat, Tara whispered. He said it was just economic reality. He said he wants to take care of us, but his hands are tied if you burn the house down. I closed my eyes. It was elegant. It was evil, and it was elegant. Boyd knew he couldn't hurt me anymore. I didn't care about him, and I didn't care about his money, so he had found the one thing I still cared about. He was using his own unborn child as a human shield. Tara, I said, opening my eyes. Did you record it? She nodded. Her hand fumbled with something off-screen. I used the app you told me about, Rev Audio. I asked him if I could record because I wanted to remember the details about the support payments. And he said, yes, Claire. He smiled and said, of course, Tara, I want you to feel secure. He agreed to it. I felt a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat. Of course, he agreed. He didn't see it as blackmail. In his mind, he was just explaining the ledger. Asset freeze equals zero cash flow, Zero cash flow equals zero support. It was just math to him. Send it to Diane, I said. Right now, I will, Tara said. But Claire, what do I do if he cuts me off? I have nothing. No job. No savings. I looked at her terrified face on the small screen. She was 28 pregnant and alone in a car in the rain because the man she loved had just explained that her survival was conditional on my silence. I didn't blame her. I couldn't. She was just another line item he was trying to delete. Send the file, Tara. Go to a hotel. Put it on my card. I hung up. I slid off the bed and sat on the floor. The carpet was rough under my hands. The draft email on my laptop screen seemed to mock me. Send it whispered. Click send and justice is done. But if I clicked send, I destroyed Tara. If I filed the whistleblower complaint, the IRS would descend. The assets would be frozen. Boyd wasn't lying about that part. The investigation would lock down the Novak fortune for months, maybe years, and in that time Tara would be collateral damage. I pulled my knees to my chest. I had thought I was fighting for myself. I thought I was fighting for the truth. But I realized now that the truth had a price tag, and Boyd had made sure I wasn't the only one who would have to pay it. I looked at the rain hitting the window. I was back in the kitchen at 5:30 in the morning. I was back at the table with the white lilies. I was trapped. Boyd had checkmated me. He had looked at the board, seen that he couldn't take my queen, and simply aimed his gun at the pawn I was trying to protect. I lay down on the floor. I stared at the ceiling shadows. I had spent 9 years making the numbers balance. I had spent 9 years fixing the errors, but there was no formula for this. There was no spreadsheet that could reconcile doing the right thing with protecting an innocent person. For the first time since I walked out of the restaurant, I didn't know what to do. The silence of the hotel room wasn't peaceful anymore. It was a cage. Diane's office at 10:30 on a Thursday night felt like a bunker. The cleaning crew had come and gone hours ago, leaving the hallway lights dimmed to a conservation yellow. Inside, the only illumination came from the green banker's lamp on Diane's desk, and the rain streaking against the window pane catching the streetlights from Wicker Park below. I sat in the client chair holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. My hands were wrapped around the ceramic mug, trying to steal warmth that was no longer there. Diane was pacing. She had kicked off her heels and was walking in her stocking feet, a rhythmic thump-thump turn on the carpet. "There is a way," she said, stopping in front of the window. I looked up. My eyes felt gritty, lined with the sand of sleeplessness. A way to what I asked, to stop the IRS, because if I do not file, Boyd wins. He keeps his money, he keeps his secrets, and he keeps Tara under his thumb. Diane turned. Her silhouette was cut sharp against the wet glass. "No," she said, "a way to protect the baby without stopping the train." She walked back to her desk and pulled a legal pad from under a stack of files. "Illinois law prioritizes child support above almost every other debt," she said, her voice picking up speed, even above the IRS in many cases. "But Boyd is relying on the process to freeze him out. He is banking on the fact that if the assets are locked, he can claim inability to pay until the audit is over." She tapped the pad with a pen. "But we can bypass the court schedule. We draft a civil support agreement, a voluntary binding contract where he acknowledges paternity and agrees to a specific lump sum support structure or an irrevocable trust for the child." I shook my head. "Why would he sign that? He just threatened to cut her off." "Because he thinks he has won," Diane said, softly. "He thinks you are cornered. If Tara goes to him tomorrow, before you file anything, and says she wants to sign an agreement, just to feel secure, just to have it on paper, so she doesn't have to worry about the logistics, he will sign it. He wants to look like the benevolent provider. He wants to be the hero who takes care of his mistress while his crazy ex-wife tries to burn the house down." I sat up straighter. "If he signs it before the IRS freeze," I asked, "does it hold?" "It becomes a pre-existing legal obligation," Diane said. "The court can enforce it even if the corporate accounts are frozen. He cannot claim he cannot pay if he legally agreed he had the funds to pay 24 hours earlier. It traps him in his own generosity." I looked at the rain hitting the window. It was a gamble. It relied on Boyd's arrogance. But I knew Boyd's arrogance better than I knew the tax code. It was the most reliable asset he had. Diane sat down. She looked at me across the desk, her expression serious. But Claire, she said, I need to ask you something. And I need you to answer honestly. Ask me. Do you want to be right or do you want them to be wrong? I frowned. I do not understand the difference. There is a difference, she said. If you want to be right, you submit the files, let the system work, and walk away. You accept that the outcome is out of your hands. But if you want them to be wrong, if you want to see them fall, you will never be free. You will spend the rest of your life watching the scoreboard. The room went silent. The hum of the building's heating system seemed to grow louder. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. A woman in a charcoal suit, tired 40 years old, sitting in a lawyer's office in the middle of the night. I want to not think about this anymore, I whispered. I want to put it down. Then submit it, Diane said. And let it go. 2 a.m. The hotel room was a capsule of silence, floating 12 stories above the street. I had turned off the heating unit because the noise distracted me, so the air was still and cool. The only light came from my laptop screen, casting a blue spectral glow over the duvet. I sat at the small desk, my feet bare on the carpet. The draft email to the IRS was open. It had been open since Tuesday. Form 211 attached. Form 3949A attached. Folder MISC backup attached. I wasn't reading the text forms. I was thinking about the folder. 847 files. For 9 years, I thought I was just being a diligent accountant. I thought I was saving receipts to protect the company in case of an audit. But sitting there in the dark, listening to the distant wail of a siren, I realized that was a lie I had told myself to survive. I hadn't saved them for the IRS. I opened a subfolder I hadn't looked at in years. It wasn't financial. It was medical, genetic report. November 4 years ago. I remember the room. White walls, white sheets. The doctor explaining that the recurring miscarriages had a genetic marker, something that came from both sides but was triggered by a specific chromosomal issue on the paternal line. I had been alone. Boyd was in Las Vegas for a conference. I had called him. 4 seconds of silence. It is fine, he had said. I will be home as soon as I can. He hadn't come home for 2 more days. I remembered lying in that hospital bed, pulling up my work email on my phone because Patricia needed the quarterly projections. I had worked through the grief because work was the only place where the numbers made sense. But I had saved the report. I had emailed it to my personal account. Why? Because I needed proof, not for a court, for me. I needed proof that it had happened, that the baby had existed, that I had existed. In the Novak house, if something wasn't acknowledged by Patricia or Boyd, it faded. It became a rumor. My grief was inconvenient, so it was ignored. My questions were annoying, so they were dismissed. I looked at the folder on the screen. These weren't just tax documents. This was a catalogue of reality. Every hotel receipt for a mistress was a moment I had been gaslit. Every hidden account was a conversation where I had been told I was imagining things. I wasn't filing this to destroy them. I was filing this to prove that I was sane. I picked up my phone. I opened the photo gallery. I scrolled back to the wedding. There was only one photo left, one I hadn't deleted yet. It was me standing in the garden laughing at something the photographer had said. I looked young. I looked hopeful. I didn't press delete. I pressed archive. I moved it to a folder named before. I didn't delete it because it had happened. I wasn't going to erase my own history the way they had tried to. I was just moving it out of the present. I put the phone down. I looked at the laptop. Diane's question echoed in the room. Do you want to be right? Yes. I wanted to be right. I wanted the truth to be on the record, stamped with a federal date and time. I opened my email and typed a message to Diane first. Get Taro to sign the agreement tomorrow morning. Do that first. Tell me when it is done. I sent it. Then I turned back to the IRS draft. I looked at the clock. 2:47 in the morning. The city outside was asleep. Patricia was asleep in her mansion in Lake Forest, dreaming of her legacy. Boyd was asleep in the house I had cleaned for 9 years. They were safe in their beds, confident that the world worked the way they said it worked. I placed my finger on the trackpad. I didn't feel angry. That was the strange part. I expected rage. I expected heat. Instead, I felt a profound quiet clarity. Like the moment after a fever breaks, I clicked send. The progress bar flashed blue. Sending, send. The email vanished from the screen. I sat there for a long minute. I waited for the regret. I waited for the panic. Nothing came, just the hum of the refrigerator in the corner and the sound of my own breathing, steady and deep. I closed the laptop. I turned off the lamp. I crawled into the hotel bed and pulled the heavy white comforter up to my chin. For the first time in 9 years, I didn't worry about whether I had forgotten to lock the back door. I didn't worry about the coffee being ready for Boyd. I closed my eyes. The darkness wasn't scary. It was just dark. I woke up at 7:30. The rain had stopped. The sky outside the window was a brilliant hard blue, the kind of clarity you only get in Chicago after a storm has scrubbed the air clean. I took a shower. The water was hot and pressure was strong. I washed my hair, scrubbing away the hairspray and the stale air of the lawyer's office. I opened my suitcase. I had packed quickly the night of the party, grabbing things blindly. At the bottom of the bag was a red sweater. I had bought it 3 years ago. It was cashmere, soft and bright, the color of a poppy field. I had worn it once. Patricia had looked at it, pursed her lips, and said, "That color is a bit aggressive, dear. It enters the room before you do." I had put it away and worn beige for 3 years. I pulled it out. I put it on. I looked in the mirror. The red reflected against my skin, making me look awake alive. It was aggressive. It was loud. I liked it. I walked to the window. The city was waking up. The traffic was moving on Michigan Avenue, a river of yellow taxis and silver sedans. People were walking to work, holding coffees, checking phones, living their lives. They didn't know that at 2:47 in the morning, the Novak Empire had been fatally breached, and the world was still turning. The sun was still shining. My phone buzzed on the dresser. I walked over and picked it up. A text from Diane. IRS automated confirmation received. Tara signed the agreement with Boyd an hour ago. He thought he was winning. It is done. I looked at the message. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman in the red sweater looked back. She wasn't smiling, not exactly. But her shoulders were down. Her eyes were clear. I put the phone in my pocket. I grabbed my room key. I walked out of the room, and the door clicked shut behind me with a sound like a period at the end of a long sentence. The coffee shop on the corner of Clark and Diversey was loud. It smelled of burnt espresso beans and wet raincoats, a sharp acidic scent that was nothing like the polished atmosphere of the Novak executive suite. I sat at a scratched wooden table near the back, my hands wrapped around a paper cup. Tara sat opposite me. She looked different. In the 2 weeks since the birthday party, the softness in her face had hardened into something brittle. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, the kind you tie when you stop caring who is looking at you. She wore a heavy sweater, but I could see the curve of her belly pressing against the wool. She pushed her phone across the table. "There are 23 files," she said. Her voice was flat, stripped of the bubbly enthusiasm I had known for 28 years. I looked at the phone. It was open to the Revel audio app. "You recorded everything I asked." "I was scared I would forget what the doctor said," she said, looking down at her hands. "You told me to use it for the medical appointments, so I just kept it on." She took a breath, shaky and shallow. "The file from Thursday is at the top. The one where he came to the apartment." I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to listen to it yet. Diane had already transcribed it for the filing. "Why did he let you record him?" I asked. "That is the part I do not understand. Boyd is careful. He never puts anything in writing if he can help it." Tara let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. I asked him, "Claire." I held up the phone and said, "Do you mind if I record this? My memory is bad lately." And he smiled. He patted my hand and said, "Of course, Tara. I want you to feel secure. I want you to have a record of how I am taking care of you." She looked up at me and her eyes were dry and old. "He didn't think he was threatening me, Claire. He thought he was explaining the rules. He thought he was being generous by telling me exactly how he was going to starve us out if you didn't cooperate." I nodded. It made perfect sense. To Boyd, leverage wasn't a weapon. It was just a tool of the trade. He hadn't realized that explaining the mechanics of a trap is the same thing as setting it. I picked up the phone. I sent these to Diane, Tara said. All of them, even the ones where I said things about you. I want you to have everything. I put the phone in my purse. The civil support agreement is signed, I said. Diane filed it this morning. It is binding. He cannot revoke the trust for the baby, no matter what happens with the IRS investigation. Tara nodded. She didn't say thank you. There was too much between us for gratitude. I am moving out of the apartment Patricia rented, she said. I found a studio in Rogers Park. It is small. It smells like curry and old wood. But my name is on the lease. That is good, I said. We sat in silence for a long time. The espresso machine hissed. A student at the next table laughed at something on his laptop. I do not forgive you, I said. I needed to say it. I needed the words to be in the air between us, solid and real. I know, Tara whispered. I do not expect you to. But you are my sister, I said. And that baby is my niece or nephew. That does not change because you made a mistake. Tara looked at me then. A tear slipped down her cheek, tracking through the exhaustion on her face. Are you okay, Claire? She asked. It was the same question I had asked her, the question nobody else had asked either of us. I picked up my coffee. It was lukewarm, but I drank it anyway. I am getting there, I said. The conference room at the law firm of Hartley and Associates was designed to intimidate. The table was a slab of black granite that looked like a tombstone. The view from the 42nd floor reduced Chicago to a toy set. I sat on one side of the granite slab. Diane sat next to me. Boyd sat opposite. He looked tired. The crisp lines of his navy suit seemed to hang a little looser on his frame. He didn't look at me. He looked at a point somewhere near my left shoulder, his jaw set in a line of irritated patience. His lawyer, a man named Sterling, who smelled of peppermint and aggressive cologne, was shuffling papers. This was the discovery phase, a formality, usually. But Sterling had insisted on seeing my medical records. He had filed a motion claiming that my history of instability regarding the miscarriages was relevant to the breakdown of the marriage. It was a fishing expedition. He wanted to find a note from a therapist or a prescription for antidepressants, anything, to paint me as the fragile broken wife. Diane placed a single document on the center of the table. Per your request for full disclosure of reproductive medical history, she said, her voice cool and level. We are submitting the genetic pathology report from Mrs. Novak's third miscarriage. Sterling frowned. He picked up the paper. Boyd looked bored. He checked his watch, the Omega Patricia had given him. Sterling scanned the document. His eyebrows drew together. He stopped shuffling his papers. He looked at Diane, then at the document, then at Boyd. He slid the paper across the granite. You should read this, Mr. Novak. Boyd Sehill. He picked up the paper with the air of a man indulging a child. I watched him. I watched his eyes move to the top of the page. The 12th of November 2021. I watched him read the summary. Chromosomal analysis indicates a translocation error. I watched him reach the paragraph I had memorized 4 years ago in a hospital bed while he was in Las Vegas. The genetic anomaly is paternal in origin. Carrier testing is recommended for the father to assess recurrence risk. Boyd stopped. The room went absolutely silent. The hum of the building's air filtration system sounded like a roar. He read it again. I saw his eyes track back to the start of the sentence. Paternal in origin. He looked up. For the first time in weeks, he looked directly at me. His face didn't crumple. Boyd didn't crumple. But the color drained out of him, leaving his skin the color of old parchment. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. You knew, he whispered. The word came out like a rustle of dry leaves. I placed my hands on the table. They were steady. I knew, I said. Why didn't you tell me I tried, I said. I called you. You were at the tables. You told me it was fine and that you would be home when you could. You hung up. Boyd stared at me. He was remembering. I could see the memory playing out behind his eyes, the casino noise, the drink in his hand, the annoyance of his wife calling with another crisis. The doctor sent a copy to the house, I said softly. I filed it. I thought you would see it when you did the taxes. But you never looked at the files, Boyd. You never looked at anything I did." He looked down at the paper in his hand. For 9 years, Patricia had told him that I was the broken one, that my body was the failure, that he was the victim of my inadequacy. It was the narrative that justified everything, the distance, the coldness, the affair, the baby with Tara. "I need an heir," he had told himself. "Claire cannot give me one." And here, in black and white, was the truth he had paid $47,000 to ignore. He wasn't the victim, he was the cause. The silence stretched out heavy and suffocating. Sterling reached out and gently took the paper from Boyd's hand, sliding it into a folder. "We will take this under advisement," the lawyer said. Boyd didn't move. He sat frozen, staring at the empty space on the granite where the truth had been. I stood up. Diane stood with me. "We are done here," Diane said. We walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see him suffer. I just needed him to know that I knew. And now he knew that I had carried his secret for 4 years, not to protect myself, but because he hadn't cared enough to ask. 2 weeks later, the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel was a sea of black tuxedos and silk gowns. It was the annual stakeholder dinner for Novak Family Holdings, the event Patricia lived for. The air smelled of prime rib, expensive lilies, and the collective anxiety of 200 people who knew something was wrong but were too polite to say it. I walked in through the side doors. I wasn't wearing beige. I was wearing a navy blue dress, sharp and tailored, with a neckline that was professional but unapologetic. Diane walked beside me, a silent sentry in black. The room quieted. It wasn't a sudden silence. It was a ripple that started at the door and spread outward as heads turned. Patricia was standing near the podium at the front of the room. She was wearing emerald green tonight, and her diamonds caught the light of the chandeliers. She saw me. Her smile faltered just for a second before she plastered it back into place. I saw Boyd standing next to her. He looked thinner. He held a glass of scotch with a grip that turned his knuckles white. I didn't walk toward them. I walked toward table 1. Robert Ashford stood up. He was the managing partner of Ashford Capital, the largest investor in the Novak portfolio. He was a man of 60, with silver hair and eyes that had seen every market crash since the 80s. He had received the IRS third-party subpoena 3 days ago. He had called Diane immediately. He didn't wait for me to reach him. He stepped out from the table and met me halfway across the parquet floor. "Mrs. Novak," he said. His voice was loud enough to carry. I extended my hand. "Miss Novak, actually. I am using my maiden name professionally now." Robert Ashford took my hand. His grip was warm and firm. "Claire, then," he said. "Thank you for coming. I know this is unorthodox." He turned and walked me to table 1. The table was set for 10. Patricia's seat was at the head facing the room. Boyd's was to her right. The other seats were filled with board members who were studiously examining their silverware. Ashford walked past the empty seats on the side. He walked to the head of the table, Patricia's seat. He pulled the chair out. "Please," he said, "sit here." The sound of the chair scraping against the floor was louder than a gunshot. The entire room seemed to inhale at once. I looked at the chair. It was high-backed leather, commanding. For 9 years, I had sat at the foot of the table, or at the kids' table, or in the kitchen, checking the catering manifests. I looked at Patricia. She was standing 10 feet away, frozen. Her mouth was slightly open. She looked at Ashford, then at the chair, then at me. I sat down. I didn't rush. I smoothed my dress. I placed my hands on the white tablecloth. I looked up at Robert Ashford. "Thank you, Robert." Ashford took the seat to my right, Boyd's seat. He turned his back to the podium where Patricia was standing. "I have some questions about the audit, Claire," he said, his voice conversational, but carrying perfectly in the silent room, specifically regarding the dual ledger system referenced in the subpoena. "Can you walk me through the methodology you used to identify the discrepancies?" I looked around the table. The board members were looking at me, not with pity, with attention. "I can," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used in client meetings, the voice of the senior tax accountant. The discrepancies began appearing 9 years ago. They were categorized as consulting fees and discretionary travel. I have the documentation to show that these funds were not used for business purposes. Patricia stepped forward. She walked to the table. Her face was flushed, two bright spots of color high on her cheeks. "Robert," she said. Her voice was high-tight. "I really think we should discuss this in private. Claire is going through a very difficult personal transition. She is unwell." She looked at the room, appealing to the crowd. "We are all very concerned about her mental state." I stopped speaking. I didn't interrupt her. I just turned my head and looked at her. I gave her the same look I had given her in the hotel lobby, the look of a tenant who had bought the building. I didn't say a word. I just waited. Robert Ashford didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on me. "You were saying, Claire, regarding the consulting fees." Patricia stood there. She was the chairman of the board. She was the matriarch. And she was standing by the table like a waitress, waiting to take an order that nobody wanted to give. She looked at Boyd. Boyd was staring at his couch. He didn't move to help her. He couldn't. He was remembering the genetic report. He was remembering the text messages. He was remembering that he was the one who had brought us here. Patricia made a small choke sound. She looked around the room, realizing that the silence wasn't respectful anymore. It was embarrassed. She pulled out a chair, a side chair, 3 spots down from the head. She sat. I turned back to Ashford. As I was saying, I sat picking up my water glass. The consulting fees were paid to shell companies with no physical addresses. I have cross-referenced the tax IDs with the state registry. They do not exist. I spent the next hour talking about numbers. I didn't talk about the affair. I didn't talk about the baby. I didn't talk about the cruelty. I talked about the math. And in that room of bankers and investors, the math was the only language that mattered. When the dinner ended, Ashford stood up and shook my hand again. "We will be reviewing our position with Novak Holdings," he said quietly. "But whatever happens, Claire, if you ever need a reference, well, you know where to find me." I walked out of the ballroom. I passed Patricia. She was still sitting in the side chair, staring at the centerpiece of white lilies. She looked smaller. She looked old. I didn't stop. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. I walked out the double doors down the grand hallway and out into the Chicago night. The air was cold and clean. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with it. Monday morning, 8 o'clock. My new apartment in Lincoln Park was small, but it was mine. It was a third-floor walk-up with hardwood floors that creaked and a bay window that looked out over a row of elm trees. There were boxes everywhere, stacked against the walls. I hadn't unpacked everything yet. I stood in the kitchen. It was painted a soft yellow, a color Patricia would have hated. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed. I poured a cup. I walked to the window. I wasn't wearing a suit. I was wearing yoga pants and an oversized t-shirt. My hair was down. I took a sip of the coffee. It was hot. It burned my tongue a little, a sharp, pleasant reminder that I was awake. For 9 years, my morning routine had been a race, up at 5:30, coffee made for Boyd, coffee drunk cold while answering emails. Now it was 8. The sun was fully up, casting dappled shadows on the floor. I looked at the trees. The branches were bare stripped for winter, but I knew that under the bark, the sap was moving. Spring would come. It always did. My phone buzzed on the counter. I walked over and picked it up. "Diane?" I smiled. I swiped to answer. "Good morning, counselor," Claire Diane said. Her voice was warm, lacking the sharp edge of battle readiness. "I just wanted to check in. I got a call from the IRS agent Martin Osei. He confirmed the file is moving to the next stage. It will take time." 12 months, maybe 18. "I know," I said. "I can wait." And hardly called, she added. "They want to settle the divorce. They are dropping the confidentiality demand. They just want it over." I leaned against the counter. "Let them wait a little longer," I said. "I am in no rush." Diane laughed, a real laugh. "How are you?" she asked. "And don't give me the lawyer answer." I looked around the apartment. I looked at the single mug in the sink. I looked at the keys on the counter, my keys to my door. I thought about Tara's safe in her studio in Rogers Park. I thought about my mother driving up next weekend for her birthday. I thought about the job at Feldman and Associates starting on Monday. I wasn't happy exactly. Happiness was a destination, and I was still on the road, but I felt light. I felt solid. I walked back to the window. A red cardinal landed on the bare branch of the elm tree. It looked bright and defiant against the gray bark. "I am okay, Diane," I said. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't saying it to make someone else feel better. I was saying it because it was the truth. I am really okay. I hung up the phone. I held the warm cup in both hands and watched the bird take flight, a flash of red disappearing into the blue sky. I took another sip of coffee. It was still hot. Claire Novak didn't burn down a house with gasoline. She didn't scream in a courtroom or throw wine in a crowded restaurant. She simply stopped holding up the walls for people who never noticed she was the one carrying the weight. And that is perhaps the most powerful lesson we can take from her story. How many of you recognize yourself in that 5:30 a.m. kitchen? How many of you have trained yourselves to be small, to be quiet, to be the low-maintenance partner or the reliable employee, thinking that if you just endure enough, you will eventually be appreciated? We are often taught that resilience means absorbing the blow without cracking. We are taught that keeping the peace is a virtue, even when that peace is built entirely at our expense. But Claire shows us the danger of that thinking. When you make yourself invisible to keep others comfortable, you don't just lose your voice, you lose your protection. Boyd counted on Claire's silence. He bet his entire future on the fact that she was too polite to fight back. He mistook her patience for weakness and her competence for compliance. But here is the truth, that Claire discovers silence is not always surrender. Sometimes silence is data collection. Claire saved herself not because she was lucky, but because she was paying attention. She had the receipts literally and figuratively. In a world that often dismisses women's intuition as paranoia, Claire validated her own reality with 847 files. The lesson here is practical and urgent. Never outsource your own security. Whether it is your marriage, your career, or your family, you need to know the numbers. You need to know where the money goes. You need to read the documents before you sign them. Blind trust isn't love, it's a liability. If Claire hadn't opened those files, if she hadn't saved that genetic report, her story would have ended very differently. She would have been the victim of a narrative written by people who didn't care about her. Instead, she became the author of her own ending. And think about the moment she sat on the floor of that hotel room eating pizza. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was a mushroom slice on a carpet. But it was the first time in 9 years she took up space without apologizing for it. Strength isn't always a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes, strength is just deciding that you are done being the shock absorber. It is wearing the red sweater that someone told you was too aggressive. It is drinking your coffee while it is still hot instead of waiting until everyone else has been served. So I want to ask you, what are you enduring right now just to keep the peace? Is there a conversation you are avoiding, a file you are afraid to open, or a boundary you have been too scared to draw? We often wait for a perfect moment to stand up for ourselves. We wait for the fear to go away. But as Claire showed us in that lawyer's office, the fear doesn't leave. You just have to decide that your dignity is worth more than your fear. You have to decide that you are worth a fight. Claire didn't get a fairy tale ending. She didn't get an apology from Patricia or a confession from Boyd. She got something better. She got her life back. She got a key to a door that only she could open and a morning routine that belonged entirely to her. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever felt like the invisible beam holding up a house that isn't yours, I hope you take this as a sign. You don't have to burn it all down. You just have to stop carrying the weight that was never yours to bear. Look at the numbers, trust your gut, and please drink your coffee while it's hot.